Okay, welcome back everybody. Good evening. Hope we had a whole meaningful Yontif, which is the point of the Yontif, and that rather the point of the Yontif is ultimately to take the meaning of all the Yom Tovim, all the holidays, and carry them through the entire year. The point of HaKadosh Baruch Hu choosing a certain day a year is not just to celebrate that day, but the point is to bring the spirit of the day, the significance of the day, the meaning of the day throughout the entire year, maybe Rosh Hashanah and Kippur, and namely Shmini Atzeres and Chas Torah is an example. It's just a sample of serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu with joy and elation. So it's called Zman Simchaseinu, time of joy, but it's not limited to that time. It is about that Yontif, but the point is to carry it through the entire year. So we hope you all had a nice and meaningful Yontif, and namely we carry all these important and beautiful spirits throughout the entire year. We have a meaningful year, a year invested in a year we were able to stay focused, and in a year of investment, important investment in this which we ought to stay focused in, which is serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu with passion and joy, elation, gladness of heart. Again, all in our serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu, literally learning Torah and doing mitzvahs and making this world a home for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And we hope this year, again, we should be able to see the fruition in the most apparent, manifest manner, the ultimate fruition of all our work, like we learn in Tanya, that the whole world recognizes, the whole world recognizes, and that Hashem's name will be one, and He will be one. He will be one, His name will be one. Again, the world will recognize the Creator and the Creator's master plan with creation. We continue on in Perek Lamed Zayin, in the original text. It's in page Mem Zayin. On the bottom of the page, Zeis V'Eid Acheres. Zeis V'Eid Acheres, and you can see it in corresponding English text. So, if we remember, the Alter Rebbe in this chapter, as it comes as a continuation, direct continuation, Perek Lamed Vav, that Mashiach's coming, the ultimate shleimus of Yemei Mashiach, which is the Tchias HaMeisim, the resurrection of the dead, which then there will be a revelation of the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the revelation of the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in this very physical world. So it's not just something that comes, it's not just a revelation that comes out of nowhere, or rather just Hashem's decision, just to open the light, or rather to introduce this revelation. But it's a direct result of our doings and our service throughout the entire span of exile. And then when HaKadosh Baruch Hu does, rather, he does open the light. But when you say open the light, you don't create something new. If there's, for example, a chest full of gold and silver and diamonds and so on, with tremendous amount of money, and it's sitting in a dark room, you just can't appreciate it because you don't know exactly where it is, and it's hard to open the box when it's pitch dark, and you can't have really your hands on it. So when you open the light, then you can start appreciating. But the light did not create that treasure. The treasure is there for whatever reason, however it got there. The light opens up so you can benefit from it. Similarly, the treasure, which is the presence of godliness in this very world, this comes through our doings. This comes through 3,300 years. Over 3,300 years of the investment of Am Yisrael and their doing to their Maisa, their Avodah, their service, and the Lashon is Ma'aseinu Avodah, saying their doings and their service, and their services as they created this phenomenon of godliness connecting to and being revealed in this very physical world. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when Mashiach comes, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu just opens the light, just demonstrates to us and to the entire world what we have accomplished throughout all of history. That's basically, again, you could see it in detail how the Alter Rebbe begins this chapter, and in the previous chapters. You could always look at this very website, the link box Tanya, or as we mentioned, to see this, go through it with the text, is on the hosted again by the same honorable hosts, but it's a website designated to this particular class, the Tanya class, which is tanyaonline.com. With easy access to all the previous classes, as well as, again, even all these classes, the classes which you tune into, you can follow with the actual text, easily follow with the text. So you can see it again, how the Alter Rebbe builds up in the beginning of this chapter 37, based on the message of Lamed Vav 36. The Alter Rebbe, in a very organized manner, explains, shows us how this happens, how what actually happens when a person does a mitzvah. So he begins with the actual doing a mitzvah, what transpires when a person does a mitzvah, which introduces again, that connects heaven and earth, connects the God with the physical reality. Then he goes on to learning Torah, that even learning Torah, even though there's not much action, it's not primarily not about action, but he shows you again, even learning Torah, there's that connection with the spiritual and the physical. Then Zeis Veidacheres, here the Alter Rebbe, again we could see it in detail in the previous classes. Zeis Veidacheres, here the Alter Rebbe today goes on, he says, the more so, where the connection with the spiritual and the physical is not only through the person, it doesn't only begin, it doesn't commence with the involvement of man, it may be action or learning Torah and so on, but more than that, it begins and initiates earlier than that. And this again is another dimension, how this world, the connection of the physical world to the godly reality, which is, as Alter Rebbe is going to go on and say, where does the person have the ability to learn Torah and do mitzvahs, is because he's living, he's alive. The chayis, the energy which comes into him, that gives him that obviously allows him to learn Torah and do mitzvahs. But where does the energy come from? This is the message. Where does the energy of man come from? It comes from because he has a good meal. He has a meal, for example, a nourishing meal, nutritious meal, and so he gains strength, and with that he's able to he follows and he's able to do the mitzvah. A person, God forbid, doesn't eat, he would God forbid expire. So what gives man his energy is ultimately so it's with the energy of man, that's how he could go ahead and learn Torah and do mitzvahs. But the energy itself comes from the food he eats and the drink that he drinks, which the food he eats and the drink that he drinks is also part and parcel of Olam Hazeh, this physical world. Meaning to say, as an example, a person eats bread, lechem levade v'reish yisod, as the pasuk said, bread satiates the heart, brings satisfaction to the heart, and primarily bread. And what is the bread? The bread is wheat, which grows in this very physical world, mixed with water, which is also one of the elements of this physical world. So when you take the bread and you eat it, and similarly if it's the tomato, the cucumber, whatever you eat, which ultimately gives you the chayis, gives you the life and energy force in order to learn Torah and do mitzvahs, that itself is part of Olam Hazeh. So if via this energy, which you receive from this piece of bread as an example, you go ahead and learn Torah, or you do the mitzvah, so the bread itself is elevated to a likus. The flour which the bread is made out of, the water, whatever the bread is made out of, which is also all, and I say this where the bread is made out of because it is part of its tzmicha of the world of tzomech, of vegetation. So we know there's the four elements, domim, tzomech, chaim, medaber, and the water is part of the doimim, the inanimate, and the flower is part of the tzemech, again the element of vegetation. That is part of the four of Elam Haza, of this physical world, which is equally elevated when you subsequently and consequent to the energy which you receive from the bread, go ahead and learn Torah and do Hashem's mitzvah. So that itself is elevated. So that itself also becomes and connects with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Ein Sof Baruch Hu, the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because that is what ultimately gives the energy for the person to learn Torah and do mitzvahs. So this is again another dimension of this notion of the physical world attaching itself to Elokus, to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, or better yet, HaKadosh Baruch Hu connecting with the physical world. So it doesn't only initiate when your person starts learning Torah again based, or does the mitzvah based on the explanation of last week, what transpires when a person does a mitzvah or learns Torah. Again, the connection of the physical with the spiritual, but because it begins even more than that, even prior to that, based on what we just explained. And again, in here, we're going to follow the text, this very message, with the words beginning Zeis v'Eid. Zeis, this what we've spoke till now, that dimension of the connection of heaven, of the spiritual and the material. V'Eid acheres, in additional to this, shekeich nefesh chayunis hamislabeshes beis adibur b'talmud Torah, the energy of the nefesh chayunis, in other words, that vivifying soul, which we mentioned, that is the nefesh habahamis, which invests in the letters and words, in the letters of one's speech in learning Torah, or tefillah, or in prayer, or anything similar, or mitzvahs maisius, or the energy which is invested in man's physical performance of the mitzvahs, the growth and its life comes from mihadam, from the blood, which comes from Klipas Nega, which is, as we mentioned, without elaborating again, that's the neutral Klipa, which has the ability to go either way, as we explained very briefly, right? There's three sides, the three dimensions. One which is completely Kedusha, like we mentioned, for example, Peret Tefillin and Sefer Torah. Then the opposite is an object which is associated with the Sholosh Klipas Atmei, the lower level of Klipa, which cannot be elevated. For example, the not kosher piece of meat, one cannot eat a not kosher piece of meat with the intention and say, I'm gaining energy, and with this I'm elevating myself. I'm gaining energy, with this I'm able to learn Torah based on the energy I receive from the non-kosher piece of meat. That will never happen. And Hashem says, do not engage with that, don't consume that. Is because that is such a lowly level of tumah, of impurity, that one purifies his soul when he engages with this, what HaKadosh Baruch Hu says not to. And even he later takes the energy and puts it into Torah. He brings the Torah down into this level of Klip Shol Kibbutz Atmeis. Not only he did not elevate it again into this lower level of impurity which cannot be elevated. That's where he brings his Torah, that's where he brings his Maisa. So not only he didn't elevate the physical, but quite on the contrary, he took Torah, which is Kedusha, and he brought it down to the level of Shalosh Kibbutz Atmeis, meaning say this lower level of Klippa. That is the other extreme. And all again, we spoke about this number of times, namely in the beginning of Tanya, where this was introduced, or this clear compartmentalization of between the Kedusha, Shalosh Kibbutz Atmeis, and the neutral, the middle Klippa. We mentioned it last week, or last class, or the class before. But again, just to repeat it very briefly, then there is the third, which is in the middle Klippa Snega. We gave the example, an apple. An apple is not necessarily holy on its own. It's when you make the bracha and you eat it l'shem shamayim, for a godly intention, and then you do something godly again with the energy of that apple. If you do a mitzvah, or you learn Torah, as an example, or you do a kind deed, so then the apple itself is elevated. Lashon Alter Rebbe in the original earlier chapters, in the Lashon in Perek Zayin, is ka'ela ka'karban. It becomes like a ola, like a sacrifice. And what sacrifice? The quintessential sacrifice, which is the sacrifice which is korban eilo, which is completely ascends to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which means the highest level of sacrifice this apple again, this which comes from Klippas Nega, when it's utilized for a godly and a heavenly sake, is elevated to the highest level of kedusha. It's elevated to kedusha itself, to holiness, which means this is the point of its neutrality. That it's essentially not intrinsically holy. The apple is not intrinsically holy like a pair of tefillin, l'havdil. It's when you do a mitzvah with it. This is the point of this, the notion of neutrality over here. You could take the apple and gain the energy, and God forbid speak lashon hara. So you brought the apple down into the abyss of Shalosh Klippas Atmei, the lower level of Klippa, which is associated with the Lashon Hara, because Lashon Hara is something which HaKadosh Baruch Hu says clearly, do not speak Lashon Hara. When one does, he engages with the lower level of Klippa. So when you so that apple itself falls into the lower level of Klippa, as opposed to if you take the apple, which is again neutral, and you make a bracha and you eat it l'shem shamayim for a godly sake, and you follow through with this godly action, or this learning Torah, and so on. So that apple itself is elevated to HaKadosh Baruch Hu to Kedusha. And again, we added that even like a carbon, which is not only just the regular carbon, but the quintessential carbon. That's how much it's elevated to absolute levels of holiness. So this is what the Alter Rebbe says. Similarly, the blood, the man, the dam of man, the blood of man, which again is formed and becomes becomes again this flow, this healthy energy, this healthy blood energy comes from where? Comes from everything man eats and drinks. And that's what produces the healthy blood. And what that gives chayas, that vitality, that energy, which ultimately not only contributes, but that is what gives the person the force and the energy to go ahead and learn Torah and to do mitzvahs. So the blood, and again, this which makes the health, produces the healthy blood, which is everything he eats and everything he drinks, is also elevated to Kedusha, is also elevated to the world of Kedusha. Meaning to say that it connects, the connection of the spiritual and the physical, the godly reality to the physical reality, doesn't only initiate when the person learns Torah, does mitzvahs, but even retroactively everything what he eats, and again, which made him this healthy, made him this healthy person, or gives him the vitality to go ahead and learn Torah and do mitzvahs, which is again his chayas, which is the dam, kidam, nefesh, habasar, bedamhi, what produces healthy, which is the blood, what produces the healthy blood is what he eats and what he drinks. So this is what he eats when he drinks is also elevated to Elokus and connects with the Ein Sof, with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, with the God, with the godly reality. That's what he says, which this obviously comes from the neutral klipa, which this is all this what he eats and drinks, the food items and his drink, which he ate, and he drank, and he drank, and now dam, and it becomes his healthy blood. And this was, and all this what he ate, and the food and the drink, again, maybe the bread, or maybe the vegetables or the fruit, till the moment the person eats it. L'shem shamayim, for a godly sake, they were under shayu tachas memshalto, they were under the dominance of klipas nega, which is this neutral level of klipa, despite it's not the lower level of klipa, but klipa, it remains till the person, again, it's neutral, but yet klipa, it remains till the person goes ahead and takes it and elevates it to God. So it was under the dominance of Klippas Nega, and it nourished its energy from Klippas Nega. However, the Ator now, he, at this point, it is transformed from evil to good, and it becomes consumed into the world of sanctity, into the world of divinity, into the divine reality, through the nefesh hachayunis, which means the energy, the soul of life, again, which we had this time and again, which is the nefesh hachayunis, that is the nefesh bahamis, the animal soul, the nefesh, which is bedom, not the godly soul. This is the nefesh which gives the person his life, hagodol mimeno, which grows from it, again, from these food items and from this drink, which was till this point under the dominance of Klippas Nega, and now is completely transformed from evil to good, and is included into the divine, into the holy, into the sanctified, through the Kech Nefesh HaChayunis, which grows from Mishni Slavish, which at this point was invested in Isis Eilu, these words of Torah, which means it's the energy which receives, which grows and becomes a healthy person. He becomes a person rather which has the energy which invests into the Isis Eilu, into these letters and words of Torah and Tefillah, of Torah learning, the Torah learning, and of prayer, or in this action, which again comes, the energy comes from the fact that we are alive. What keeps us alive is everything the person eats and drinks, which till the point when he does the Torah, when he learns the Torah, the mitzvahs are under the dominance of Klipas Nega. But at that point, when a person invests in the Isis, in the words of prayer, in the words of Torah, or in action, it is transformed. Why is it transformed? Because because this Telumina Torah and this Tefillah, or this Asiyah, this Maisa Mitzvahs, this is the Pnimius, the inner will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the inwardness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Ratzon. At that point there's no Hester Panim, as we spoke about many times, that only in Chitzonius HaRatzon, in the external dimension of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Ratzon, there's Shaykh, the notion of Hester Panim, of a cover-up, Kaviyachal of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and Helen Hester, and confusion and ambiguity and so on. But when it comes to the Pnimis of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there's no Hester Panim, because that is the Pnim, that's who HaKadosh Baruch Hu is, for himself, by himself. There's no cover-ups. That is the Torah, what a person learns, and that is the mitzvahs, Ma'aseh mitzvah the person does, because mitzvahs are not stam chitzeni saratzon, like the difference we mentioned a number of times, the difference of asara mamoris and asara sadibris. Asara mamoris, this is the chitzeni saratzon, HaKadosh Baruch Hu just creates a world, Eilam Lashon Helen V'Hester, which conceals and covers up over the godly reality, because this is the chitzeni, is the external dimension of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's ratzon. As opposed to Aseres HaDibres, the Aseres, the Ten Commandments, are also called Dibur, similar to Mamoris. No, but this is the Pnimius, the inwardness, this is the core essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Pnimius of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And there is no Hester Panim. And the Aseres HaDibres, that is the Torah, which is this Aseres HaDibres, which is again the Makir, V'Shedish, to all the mitzvahs, the source of, the root of all mitzvahs, Hasei. And the Torah we learn again, this is HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself, this is the Pnimis of HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself. So when the person takes the energy which he receives from the very physical world, and he goes ahead and learns Torah and does mitzvahs, which mitzvahs and Torah are Pnimis, it's Einis Baruch, without any Hester Panim. So v'chayuson, so the energy of all this which gave him the ability to go ahead and learn Torah and do mitzvahs, are also nichlal gamkin be'ein tzov baruch hu, shehuritzeni yizbarich, is also absorbed and becomes one with the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, blessed be He, which is HaKadosh Baruch Hu's ratzon. Uv'chayuson nichlal ve'el gamkin kech nefesh HaChayunis, which means that not only, the Alter Rebbe just continues over here, he says not only the actual bread or food what a person eats and this what he drinks again is elevated based on this whole which we just explained, but the entire Kech Nefesh HaChayunis is elevated as well, because Nefesh HaChayunis means the soul. The soul is neutral as well. I'll try to explain in the 6th chapter. The soul is also this Nefesh HaChayunis, Nefesh HaBaham, this is animal soul. This is the Nefesh HaBasar B'Dami, which we learn actually these very days in Parshas Bereshis, that the soul which invests in the blood of man, which ultimately gives him life. And so it's not only the details, in other words, this which he which also comes from Klippas Nega, because that's the point, to transform, that this soul should also become a conduit, should become a channel to which Kodesh Baruch Hu's energy as well flows within this world. In other words, into this world, the soul itself, which is also comes from Klippas Nega, is also meant to be elevated to the godly, to godliness. So the Alter Rebbe is just adding this word, that which means not only is that particular flower or apple or orange or tomato the person eats, and that's what gave him chayis that particular day, and therefore that is elevated to Elokus, to God, and to Kedusha, and to holiness, but more so, ultimately the entire nefesh achayunis, the entire soul is also elevated into the godly reality. And like there's a tal agavki calls Klippas Nega, she calls achai shalom mazagash mevachomi, and that through this, in the very broad, bigger picture, it says the entire force of Klippas Nega, which is ultimately, this is the chayis, the energy of this whole physical world, and this whole mundane world, is ultimately as well elevated to Elokus. So it's the food you eat which is elevated, again in this very dimension that Rebbe introduces in this week in this class, then more than the particular food item that you ate and drank which contributed to your learning and to your davening is elevated, but your entire nefesh chayunis, your entire soul is elevated, but more so the entire this physical world. And the reason why it looks like, again, it's an Elam Hazeh Gashmi and a Chumri, mundane, worldly, why does it conceal the very reality of its own very reality, which is God? Why does it look the way it does? Why does it obscure the godly reality? Because it's not receiving its energy directly from Kedusha. Had it been receiving its energy directly from Kedusha, for example, we read in this week's Parsha, prior to Chet Tzaddas, it was much more obvious in this very Elam Hazeh Gashmi, this very physical world, its connection with Creator prior to sin, Adam's sin, because it was receiving its energy from Kedusha as opposed to post-Adam Rishon sin. But again, at this point, at the entire world, Elam Hazeh Gashmi, the reason why it appears in the way it does appear, that it obscures its own godly reality, is because it's overtly receiving its energy from Klippas Nega, from this neutral Klippa. And then we have the ability, again, not from Shalosh Klippas Atmeis, although there's many items of this physical world that also receive its energy from Shalosh Klippas Atmeis, and this is what we are prohibited to engage with. But in the overall, it's a world which is demanded from the Yid to transform the world. How can you transform a world if it's receiving its energy from Klippa? But no, most of overall, the world is receiving its energy from Klippas Nega. That's where we have this mandate of transforming the world and bringing the world close to its source, to its ultimate source. In other words, to connecting the Elam Hazeh Gashmi with the Kodesh Baruch Hu, with God, with the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the world in general receives its light from Klippas Nega, its energy from Klippas Nega. So when this individual Yid learns Torah and not only elevates that particular dosage, so to say, or measurement of flour, which again is in the bread that he eats, or if it's that cucumber or that grape or so on, but more so his nefesh itself is elevated. But Alter Rebbe goes on, he says, and ultimately the entire force of the entire Elam Hazeh, the force and energy of Elam Hazeh, the entire Elam Hazeh Gashmi, also is from Klippas Nega, and that itself is transformed. Now that's a little more of a bigger weight to transform the energy, which is the overt life force of this physical world, to Elokus. So the Alter Rebbe will add, and again we'll continue, God willing, in the next week's parsha. That is where there is, because that is where is that we need that assistance of yet another Yid, and another Yid, which finds himself in the same Elam Hazeh, to ultimately transform the entire energy of Klippas Nega, which gives life to on the surface, gives life to Elam Hazeh, and ultimately the whole entire world is transformed to Elokus, and that's what it, again, this is where the notion of Mashiach, Tchias HaMesim, like it says, V'yeda Kol Pol, that every Pol, which means every created being, will appreciate and understand and have a clear, comprehensive appreciation of Ata Pa'alta V'Kodesh Baruch Hu, like it says, V'molik Kol Ha'oretz Kol Ha'oretz Deis Hashem, like the pasuk says in Yeshaya, the entire world be full of the knowledge of God. Ki ayin b'ayin yiro, the eye, the physical eye, will be able to see eye to eye with God. Kol basar yachtov, the flesh itself will be able to identify the God, the reality. Again, the entire world, v'yashem l'melech al kol ha'oretz. So that's, at that point, you need the joint effort. You need that joint effort of every single yid which is involved in this service. Because here you're not dealing with his piece of bread, it was elevated, it was his nefesh. You're dealing with the entire world which receives its energy from Klipas Nega. So at that point you need all the Yidden around the world. So when everybody does their service, so the entire world is transformed and becomes a dwelling place for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And when you say dwelling place for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, becomes becomes evident, not only the way it is till Mashiach's coming, till HaKadosh Baruch Hu decides to open the light, but again, it's happening on a constant basis from the day when HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave the Torah, but this is all a result of our effort throughout the last 3,300 years, that ultimately the entire world, based on this whole explanation, again, the joint effort of every Yid, transforms the entire world. The world which it was under the dominance of Klipas Nega becomes under the dominance of Kedusha. The automatic result is that V'yeda Kol Pol Ki Ata Pa'alta, the Yovin Kol Yitzur, the clear with clarity, clear understanding that every creation understands Ki Ata Yitzarti, the HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the sole creator, the sole energy. Again, the touch of heaven and earth, the transformation of this world, this tachtin, to a dira, an abode, again, where HaKadosh Baruch Hu is manifest and revealed, and it is within his tachtin, within his very physical world, in a very manifest and overt and revealed manner. Have a wonderful evening.